Your dog finds the worst puddle on the block. Not just any puddle, the one that's been sitting there since the last rain, green at the edges, with something in it you'd rather not identify. He doesn't sniff it twice, doesn't pause. Head goes down, tail stays up, and he's drinking like it's the finest water in the neighborhood. You say his name in the voice that means stop. He looks up at you mid-slurp, water dripping off his chin, and goes right back to it. 20 minutes later, he's on the couch, asleep, completely fine. If you'd taken even one sip of that same water, you would not be fine. You'd be on the bathroom floor, possibly for the rest of the week, maybe Googling symptoms you didn't know you could have. So what is it? What does he have that you don't? Here's the annoying answer first. It's not that he's immune. Animals get sick from bad water all the time. More often than you'd think, actually, given how confidently they walk up to swamps and ditches like nothing could touch them. The ones that lose that bet just don't do it in front of you. A sick wild animal doesn't collapse dramatically in a clearing for a nature documentary to find. It goes and hides, quietly. It either gets better back there or it doesn't, and either way you never see it. Every dog, every wolf, every backyard raccoon you've ever watched drink from something disgusting and walk away fine. That's survivorship bias with fur on it. You're only ever seeing the ones who won. Which still leaves the actual question sitting there unanswered. Why do they win so much more often than we would? Turns out it's not one trick. It's several, stacked on top of each other, starting before the water even gets past the mouth. First stop, and this one's easy to skip past, saliva. Not glamorous. But dog saliva isn't just spit, it's carrying real antimicrobial chemistry. An enzyme called lysozyme that physically tears open bacterial cell walls. Another compound, lactoferrin, that grabs all the iron in the area so bacteria can't use it to multiply. An antibody on active patrol for anything that doesn't belong. None of this makes a dog's mouth cleaner than yours in some general sense. Dog mouths are famously not clean, full of their own bacteria doing their own thing. What it means is that anything swallowed has already survived a chemical checkpoint before it even reaches the stomach. And then, the stomach. This is the part people have actually heard of, usually phrased like, a dog's stomach acid is basically industrial. Quick detour, because this is the point where someone always brings up the other myth. The one about a dog's mouth being cleaner than a human's, supposedly clean enough to lick a wound safely. It isn't, really. Dog mouths carry their own bacteria, some of it's stuff you'd rather not think about while he's licking your face after that puddle. The saliva chemistry above is real, and it's doing real work, but cleaner than yours oversells it. It's a checkpoint, not a mouthwash commercial. Back to the acid. There's truth in there. Dog gastric pH does sit somewhere around 1 to 2 at rest, which is genuinely brutal, acidic enough to help break down bone fragments and create a brutal environment for a huge share of whatever bacteria comes along with them. But, and this is worth slowing down for, because it's the part that usually gets flattened into a cleaner story than it actually is, the popular version says something like 10 times more acidic than a human's, treating it as a fixed law of nature. It isn't quite that tidy. One well-cited comparative study, using pH sensors in both species side by side, actually recorded human fasting stomach acid as slightly more acidic than the dogs in that particular trial. Other studies land dogs consistently around pH 1 to 1.5. What's real is that a dog's stomach is a genuinely hostile acidic environment. What's not real is one fixed multiplier that applies to every dog against every human in every state. The gap shifts depending on the study, the individual, whether the stomach's empty or not, which is honestly kind of refreshing if you like your science a little messier than the viral version. Speed matters too, separate from acid entirely. A dog's digestive tract is relatively short, and food is often processed faster than in animals built for long, slow fermentation. That may cut down the time some microbes have to multiply, though transit speed alone is nowhere near enough on its own to make contaminated water safe. The actual bacteria in question, by the way, aren't exotic movie villain pathogens. Usually, it's the same familiar names that show up in a human hospital lab: E. coli, Salmonella, Giardia. Nothing a dog's body has some special alien defense against, just the ordinary stuff, meeting a much harsher gauntlet on the way through. Giardia specifically is worth a second, actually, because it's the one that breaks the just stomach acid theory a little. It survives in water by forming a hard outer shell called a cyst, built to shrug off exactly the kind of harsh environment a stomach is. It's genuinely resilient stuff, which is part of why even a dog with brutal gastric acid can still occasionally end up with a Giardia infection. No single layer here is a perfect wall. It's the whole stack together that tips the odds, not any one piece of it working alone. Here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because not every animal solved this the same way, and the horse is where it flips entirely. A horse doesn't have a dog's kill-it-fast stomach. Most of a horse's actual digestion happens somewhere else, an organ called the cecum, basically a fermentation vat sitting where the small and large intestine meet. One horse's cecum alone can hold something like 25 to 35 liters. The whole hindgut system beyond it tops 100 liters. And packed into that space is one of the densest microbial communities found in any animal. Thousands of species, already occupying every available niche, already running the place. When a horse drinks from a river and picks up some new bacteria along with the water, that bacteria doesn't land in open ground. It lands in the middle of a fully staffed, fully territorial ecosystem, and mostly just loses. Not because anything actively hunts it down, there's simply no space left to take over. It's a nice contrast, honestly. Dogs defend by killing fast. Horses defend by never leaving a vacancy. The catch, because there's always a catch, is that this same density is what makes a horse's gut so fragile. Feed it the wrong thing, too much grain, too sudden a switch in diet, and that same packed ecosystem can turn on the horse itself. Fermenting starch too fast, crashing the internal pH, sometimes tipping into colic or laminitis within hours. Every defense in this story comes with an asterisk. In the horse, the fortress and the weak point turn out to be the same thing. There's one more layer underneath all of this, and it's less about organs and more about history. Long-term exposure to the same environment, the same stream, the same stretch of territory, can shape an animal's microbiome and immune responses over time. That familiarity may improve the odds against some commonly encountered microbes, but it doesn't make an unfamiliar water source safe, and it isn't immunity exactly, closer to local knowledge that shifts the odds without being any kind of guarantee. Which is also why it's a genuinely different bet watching a dog that's grown up outside drink from a new puddle in familiar territory versus a dog raised entirely on filtered tap water, suddenly doing the same thing somewhere it's never been. Same species, same stomach. Very different track record with that general environment. So why can't we do any of this ourselves? We used to, more or less. For most of human history, there wasn't another option. And people who drank from the same well or river for generations probably built some version of that same local familiarity. Waterborne disease was, for most of recorded history, one of the biggest killers there was, long before anyone understood why. Humans still have stomach acid, antimicrobial compounds in saliva, immune defenses, and a gut microbiome of our own. We didn't lose any of that. What changed is that we didn't rely on it alone. Somewhere along the way, on top of all that existing biology, humans added a second, external layer of defense. Cooking, filtration, sewage systems, chlorination. Cooking kills pathogens before food ever touches your mouth. Water treatment does the same job centuries later, at city scale, turning rivers that used to kill people into something you drink from a tap without a second thought. It's arguably one of the single best things public health ever did for humanity. Rather than trusting the gut to win every fight against every contaminated sip, we mostly stopped the contamination before the sip happened. So back to that puddle. Your dog wasn't relying on luck alone. That water first met antimicrobial compounds in his mouth, then a highly acidic stomach, then a digestive ecosystem shaped by a lifetime of exposure to that general environment. You have versions of those same defenses too, but your digestive system, your exposure history, and honestly your whole way of life are tuned for a world where most dangerous contamination gets removed before it ever reaches your mouth. That puddle was never safe. It was simply a fight his body was better prepared to take.